Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Our guest today is Father Greg Boyle. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
We're here to talk about your book, which is called Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion. This is a wonderful book, But you're here. Let's talk a little about your background. Tell us how you ended up in a certain part of L.A. and what you did when you got there. You're a Jesuit priest. You were ordained
I was ordained in 1984, and by 1986 I was pastor of the poorest parish in Los Angeles, Dolores Mission, which was 2 public housing projects, 8 gangs. I was burying a lot of kids because of gang violence. They were all at war with each other. So I didn't go there intending to kind of start an outreach to gang members, but that sort of, I backed my way into it. So we started a school, and then we started jobs programs, and then we started enterprises, social enterprises, businesses. First a bakery we called Homeboy Bakery, and now we're the largest gang intervention, rehab, and reentry program in the world. So we serve 15,000 folks a year.
I'm very interested in why a bakery.
Well, there was here was the extent of my business plan. Across the street was an old abandoned bakery. It had ovens. I met a movie producer who had the means. I said, buy this bakery and we'll put hairnets on rival enemy gang members and we'll call it Homeboy Bakery. And he said, sure. So that was the extent of my business plan.
And there is something heartwarming about the smell of fresh baked bread and chocolate chip cookies. I mean, there's something about home and family that just even the aromas.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a wonderful thing. And now the bakery is pretty high class. And in those days, we just did the certain kind of bread. And now it's everything from pies to cupcakes to bread.
And you also have restaurants?
We have several restaurants. We have Home Grill Cafe. We have a restaurant at the LAX airport. Terminal 4, American Airlines. We have a diner at City Hall, the only place you can get food in the City Hall in Los Angeles. And a lunch truck, those kinds of things. We're about to start a kind of a commissary at a movie studio in Culver City.
Well, your efforts have not gone unnoticed. You were given the California Peace Prize, Humanitarian of the Year by Bon Appetit magazine. I never put those ideas together, but
well, every year they give awards to the best restaurant, the best chef, and a variety of foodie kinds of things. And then their very last award is the Humanitarian of the Year award. So I got that one year. So you
got that. You also got the Most Caring People of the Year from the Caring Institute, the Civic Medal of Honor from the LA Chamber of Commerce, Citizen of the Year for the Los Angeles PR Society, California Hall of Fame, honorary doctorates, lots going on. And yet you've been very humble about what you were there to do and what your inspirations have been. Talk to me a little. Well, first of all, let's have some vocabulary lessons. We have gangs here, too. But there are people in my audience who probably don't understand why you say Homeboy Industries and what homies are. Can you give us a little basic gang vocabulary?
Well, a homeboy is not just technically, somebody from my own gang. You will hear gang members say, how was school today? How was math? And so, Mr. Gomez, that's the homie right there. That's a way of saying that we're connected, that there is a connection. And so the idea was to walk in their door and have them come out another door. So if they think that their homeboys are only those, confined to, their own tiny little gang, we want them to be able to see even their enemy as homeboy and enemy as friend and camarada, as we say in Spanish. So that's the whole idea, is to kind of transform that reality into something that more greatly resembles a community of kinship.
Well, you do talk about getting to the point of us where everyone's related. Reminds me of that Ram Dass saying, we're all just walking each other home.
Yeah.
And is this primarily Spanish-speaking gangs? Is it, what percentage are?
Yeah, well, when we started, there were 8 gangs in the projects, and only one was African-American. But before too long, that gang relocated to the south of Los Angeles. So the whole of Boyle Heights, where this really began, was 99.9% Latino. Mm-hmm. And so now we're in our 4th location, and now I'd say African Americans make about 25% of the folks who work there. So you have to be formerly gang involved or a felon in order to be part of our training program.
One of the things I learned from your book is that there's a myth that the kids are pulled into gangs or pushed into gangs. What ultimately leads to it? You call it, oh my God, the lethal absence of hope. That just strikes my heart. What a terrible existential predicament to be in. But are kids lured in, or are they pushed in by their own background and environment?
I think a lot of times people think there's an attraction to gangs, that they're lured and drawn and pulled. And even if you ask gang members, they may be folks who are strangers to themselves, who really don't know how to come to terms with what's happened to them. So they'll say the usual thing, join a gang and see the world, wine, women, and song. That's why I joined a gang. But that's only because they can't talk about the unspeakable things that were done to them. That happened to every kid I know. So no kid is seeking anything when he joins a gang. He's always fleeing something, always. No, there are no exceptions to that. And so a lot of times they'll tell you, no, I wasn't fleeing anything. And I would say, well, dig deeper, because nobody's ever met a hopeful kid who joined a gang. Never. Because hopeful kids don't. It's not about good kids or bad kids. It's about kids who can't conjure up an image of what tomorrow looks like. And if tomorrow isn't very compelling for you, then your present doesn't hold you. And if that's true, then you won't care whether you inflict harm. You won't care whether you duck to get out of harm's way. So it's important. A lot of times cities come up with the perfect answer to the wrong question. And the truth is, you want to get this diagnosis right, because nobody's ever met a good treatment plan that was born of a bad diagnosis.
One of your lines is, futures, not funerals, because as you describe in your work, how many kids have you buried? These are young people full of promise that are just shooting each other, killing each other. The pain that the moms and the families go through is heartbreaking.
Yeah, in those days, every kid, even kids who weren't gang members, couldn't conjure up an image of where they'd be 10 years from now. It was dead or in prison. And so you want them to plan their futures and not their funerals. But they planned their funerals. That was kind of how they operated. Very tragic.
One of your other lines is, you can't scare a person straight, but you can care a person straight.
Yeah. I think in the old days we thought that's what it was, If only these kids knew the trouble they had gotten into, or the consequence of what this would mean. And none of it has to do with that. It has to do with them having a pilot light of hope in their heart, and the only way to deliver that really is a loving, caring adult who pays attention, who shows up in their life, who reflects them back to themselves and returns them to themselves, so that they can inhabit that truth, that they're exactly right, that they're exactly what God had in mind. And once people become that truth, then that's hugely empowering.
One of your mottos is, let's see, jobs and bullets. What is it?
Nothing stops a bullet like a job.
And then,
in the old days, it's a little creaky now, it feels, because that was our original one. But see, now I think it's more about healing. Because what happens isn't just, in the early days, we would dispatch gang members to jobs. Well, what was really needed was healing from the trauma and the damage, and so that's the hope now, is that they'll be healed before they move on.
And you mentioned, again, there's so much heartbreak and also laughter and joy in this book. But you said some of your people, because you turn the other cheek so many times, you give them how many millions of chances. This isn't only second chance, but one of the mottos said, well, it just might as well be how many times can you disappoint us?
Right.
And we'll still take you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's boundless compassion, as you call it.
Yeah, and we always talk at our place about a no matter whatness,
Ah, yeah.
That no matter what, we wouldn't withdraw love, we wouldn't withdraw support. No matter what, we're going to be in their corner. Now, they may choose to leave our place, or even if they, however they act out in such a way that tells us they're not ready to be there. But it's like a drug rehab. If somebody sneaks in drugs into a drug rehab, you say, okay, come back when you're ready. We love you. We think you're great, and we'll always be here for you. It's more that model rather than let's shame you and fire you. It's people sometimes aren't ready to do the work.
Well, you do gang intervention and rehab, and you do a tremendous amount of tattoo removal. That does change who you are.
Yeah, so we have a clinic, part of our headquarters, that has 3 laser machines and 1 paid physician assistant, but 46 volunteer doctors who perform 50,000 laser treatments a year.
Wow.
So it's a lot. We have a waiting list still always.
And so it takes away that mark. Whether it used to be the teardrop, that's how far back I go, and now it's these big MS. They're really...
Yeah, that there's, obviously it's an obstacle to employment. Mm-hmm. And then it's also alarming. It's provocative. It says, it says who you are in terms of what gang. It may say who you hate, And so in the old days, we could only afford, time-wise and money-wise, to do face and elbow down, neck and face, elbow down. And a guy came in once and lifted his shirt, and he had a huge tattoo on his chest. And I said, well, keep your shirt on, or no one will see it. And he said, my son will see it.
Oh.
And so we removed that tattoo very painstakingly, and it was... but again, we don't ask... It's not a condition of their being part of our program. We offer it to people. And like I say, we always have a waiting list of about 1,000.
Wow.
Even though we're doing it every day.
Isn't it painful, the process of tattoo
It's more painful
removal?
to get it removed than it is to get it put on. It's a little bit like, they describe it like bacon grease is spattering on you, and that bad sunburn or that kind of thing. It's even more painful now because the machines are more advanced and they attack it more surely. But the downside is that it's really more painful.
It's like a burn.
Yeah.
Taking that off.
Yeah.
You've got an amazing amount of press. You've been on 60 Minutes and on CBS Sunday Morning, one of my favorite programs, NPR's Fresh Air. And you tell a lot of stories about some of the people that you've had and ways that they've changed your life. Because you say it's that being there for them is what's really important, what they haven't experienced. Can you tell us about some of the people that affected you the most?
Well, it was actually a PBS interviewer once ended an interview by saying, how's it feel to have saved thousands and thousands of lives? And I never feel that. I always feel, I said, I don't really know what you're talking about. All I know is I show up every day. Even when I'm not there, my life is saved by these folks through text, through the magic of texting. And they're just, they teach me about courage and nobility, and I stand in awe at what they have to carry rather than judgment. There's a guy named Jermaine, African-American, probably in his mid-30s, who was... Again, part of the work there is to kind of come to terms with what's been done to you. And so and these things come back to him. And he was telling me, he was in my office, and he said he was 10, and his mom came into his room at night, opened the door, and she's standing there, and her arms are outstretched, and she has so profoundly and deeply slashed her wrists that blood is just coursing onto the floor. And she looks at him and she says, "See what you made me do." And he sort of retrieved that for the first time, you know. And he was taken from her care the next day in foster homes till he was 17, but somewhere along the line, maybe 12 or 13, he got into a gang. And after he told me that story, big tears in his eyes and mine too, he said, "I noticed that I preferred rage over shame." And I thought, boy, that's a really good insight.
Yeah.
So now he's in recovery. He's becoming something of a leader at our place. And that's why a kid joins a gang.
Yeah.
You know, and probably he would have said at 15, "Wine, women, and song." But that's the reason, that night is the reason he joined a gang.
We're speaking today with Father Greg Boyle. There's this book, Tattoos on the Heart, is full of stories like this, and it's inspiring and funny and full of grief, but always the fact that you come back to the joy, what did Ruskin call it, the duty to delight.
Yeah.
And so to go from a pain like that young man experienced, that of course buried, and to experience the delight in daily life, you give them an opportunity for that.
Well, they find it there. I defy anybody to walk into that place and not feel this palpable sense of hope and joy and delight, you know. And it's so foreign to them. You know, a lot of them have never have really had that experience in a family, as some of us may have, you know. And so that's very healing. And then they gain resilience, and then they learn how to re-identify who they are in the world. They have to make huge adjustments. Like, I used to think courage meant packing a gun, and now I see that has nothing to do with courage. But that
courage is not packing the gun.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't know that until they're in this context. So we say at Homeboy, love is the answer, but community is the context. But tenderness is the methodology. It's how you come to this kind of connective tissue, you know, that somehow joins you to the other human being in this exquisite mutuality of kinship, you know.
And the resiliency on your part, because they have done some things that, you know, out of their own pain that were, you know, if one was sensitive, one would take it personally, but you didn't. And finally, I think I read in this that one person finally said, "Well, what do you have to do to get fired around here? Use nerve gas."
Release nerve gas.
Because the boundless compassion of letting them screw up and then come back again and be accepted again and again. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you want to... You create a sanctuary for them. And then after 18 months with them, they discover that they have become the sanctuary that they sought. And then they leave our place, and the world will throw at them what it will. But this time, they won't be toppled by it. And that's sort of the key. That's why it's had such a singular impact on public safety, because we so rarely try to get at what crime is about, or gang crime, or any crime. We never really ask, what language is crime speaking? We think it's the language of the bad guy, but it's really the language of the despondent and the damaged and the traumatized and the mentally ill. And if you only were to address those things. But law enforcement, God love them, and my expectations are low that they can't ever get at what crime's about, because it's not a law enforcement issue. It's a community health issue. You know, they'll never be able to infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign. And they'll never be able to heal the traumatized or deliver mental health services. We do that. The community does that.
Well, it's true. This, you know, the recent Ferguson and all these cases, they're clearly mental health issues, and they're sending in an army instead. And because of all the cutbacks, the mental health help is not available.
But it's also a mindset. I'm less inclined to think that it's racist. I think it's the culture in policing that's so dominant. Ask any police officer what their mandate is, and they're gonna say, get the bad guy. And so people identify themselves as the bad guy to them. They flee, they show contempt for police. All these recent incidents have all been fleeing.
Unarmed,
but it's also, rather than think, oh, what language is this speaking? Or rather than think, I've just encountered this person on the worst day in their lives. Yeah. And if you believe that we belong to each other, then you're going to respond differently no matter what. So it's a vexing thing. I find the racist claim sends us down the wrong path. It's really more culturally endemic to how law enforcement sees their role, which should be addressed.
Yes. What brought you to Santa Fe?
I'm speaking this evening in support of Youth Works here in Santa Fe, which is a great organization. So it's an evening with Greg Boyle. I have to come up with some songs and dancing. No, just kidding. So, and I'm going to give a talk to a bunch of people, and it's a fundraiser for Youth Works.
And they do a lot of work getting dropouts their GEDs and helping people.
Training and
jobs.
And
very important.
And again, their mission statement talks about working with disconnected youth, which is, I think, a very good word, because the hope is, how do you connect people to each other? How do you find that connective tissue? How do you extend tenderness to folks who have had to carry more than I've ever had to carry, as certainly every youth in the Youth Works program has had to do. So you want people to move to a place of awe and away from a place of judgment when it comes to folks who are poor and voiceless and on the margins.
Yes. Well, thank you for what you've done, and thank you for coming here. I'd like to extend the local LA conversation, the local New Mexico conversation, a little bit more. You're a Jesuit, and what are your feelings about this Pope Francis?
I love him. He's great. I think he's putting first things recognizably first.
Yes, he's much beloved by Catholics and non-Catholics alike.
Yeah, no, I just find him pretty remarkable.
Yes.
I've been a Jesuit for 43 years and a priest for whatever it is, 30 years, and I don't think I've ever quoted a pope more than I have currently. So.
Another international issue is we've been the recipient of so many unaccompanied minors, children, and moms from Central America fleeing the gangs down there where they've been threatened to be killed and their whole family's been killed. And we're sending them right back. Is there any movement? Well, some are getting amnesty, but is there anyone addressing those problems? I know it's out of our neighborhood, but is there anybody working in those Central American situations? Honduras has the highest murder rate in the world.
Yeah, it's incredible. Of course, we deported all those folks long ago, so that gang reality was not born in Central America. It was born in the Pico Union area of Los Angeles, and we deported it all eventually. And so now it's created, I don't know what you do, Again, I would still hold to that human beings are involved and that folks just want to carve out some sense of hope for themselves. And if you offered light, they'd walk towards the light. We're from LA, so we know freeways.
Yes.
And imagine a freeway that had no exit ramps, and if gang violence is a freeway without an ability to leave it, which was true, I think, a long time ago in Los Angeles. And then all that did was compound the despair and increase the violence. But once you have exit ramps, once you have a way, hey, come here. we can train you to do this and have a job, and you don't have to do that. Then human beings, 95% of them, are going to walk exactly towards there. But if there's no there, then it's really quite difficult for people to move in that direction. But now it's quite extreme, and I've been invited down many times, and I haven't been able to go down. And we've had delegations from Salvador in particular come and study our model in hopes of duplicating it.
So we've got a minute or so left. I want to recommend your book, Tattoos on the Heart, The Power of Boundless Compassion, and our guest is Father Gregory Boyle. What can you tell our people when they drive by what look like gangbangers on the side of the road, or when they, what you said about not being in judgment, but being in awe? Tell us more about how we can set down that judgmental reaction to these human beings and look to find the spirit within them.
Well, there's no antidote really except relationship, and the more you can locate places like YouthWorks and somehow accompany them, and it's never about what am I going to do, in service and in volunteer work, but rather what will happen to you as you do it. And then suddenly we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we're separate and discover that we're connected.
And is there a little mantra or a prayer that people can... It's very easy to fall off that perspective when you're frightened or when you're worried or something. Is there a little reminder that you can give us to always keep it personal in the highest sense of the word?
Well, I have my own. I have a million mantras. One of them is now hear this. I always, like you would hear on a big ship making an announcement, now hear this. But it's now, this moment, here in this place, this person. And the more you can stay, we're saved in the present moment, so the more you can stay there, the more liberated you are.
A lot of the poetry that you quote is bringing a person back, be here now, coming back to the present, because then all worries are in a non-existent future. But I am so happy that you were here in this present with us, speaking today. Thank you for all the amazing, wonderful work you do.
Thank you. Privilege.
And our guest is Father Greg Boyle, and I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today, here and now, on Report from Santa Fe.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.